Hello everyone, welcome back to the course, and in this lecture I actually want to talk about moving on from block-based programming. I want to talk about transitioning to text-based programming, and I want to talk about some of the options and some of the pathways you can do that. And there are several ways to do it, so don't take what I say with a grain of salt. I just want to preface this lecture by saying that because there are so many options for learning programming outside of like text-based programming, like I guess quote real world programming. I mean, this is real world programming what we're doing, but it's not the type of thing you would use to make like normal programs and applications. Although it can be used for the same thing, it is great for teaching purposes and educational purposes, and just learning universal concepts that we have been doing. You can still do very advanced things in Scratch as we've seen, but anyways, text-based programming is the next step up. It is really the like we're right now at the doorstep of programming as you know it. But um, and I mean the door is already a crack open. You already know all these universal concepts, but it's just that there is a whole world behind that door. There's all these different languages. There's all these buzzwords being thrown around. There's all sorts of stuff. I want to help you navigate that a little bit. I want to help you, get the right foot in that door to go ahead and actually make a smooth transition. And text-based programming is just a matter of there's so many ways to do it, and here's a few ways I would recommend, but it's totally up to you, and I would highly recommend you do some of the research on your own. Also, I'll just real quickly note that every single link I refer to in this lecture will actually be linked as a resource. So don't worry about trying to like save these or copy these down as I'm doing them. They're actually linked to the lecture. Anyways, so here we have Scratch. I'm just gonna go ahead and show you some of these other tabs I have open. So actually, I'll actually walk you through my program story a little bit. Excuse me. So basically, it's what was it, like 2012, 2013? I started getting programming with Scratch. I started doing that a lot. Actually, I really enjoyed it. I didn't really see there was much to do outside of it. I guess I didn't really understand the whole world of text-based programming. I was like, oh, it's on a completely different level. I didn't realize at the time what I was doing was basically the same structure, the same thing, except for I was using blocks instead of lines of text. I didn't realize that until later. I started doing Swift was the next thing I did, which is basically for iOS, Apple devices, um, programming for that. I know I transitioned to C Sharp was kind of the next big language I learned. It's great for app development. There's also, there's app development, web development, game development. C Sharp's also great for game development if you're using it with something called Unity, which is a really big name in programming. You can use that for a lot of things, especially 3D development. It doesn't have to be 3D development, but it's really well known for 3D development and some animation purposes as well. Um, so I want to talk about C Sharp since that's a really staple, universal, versatile language, you could say. I want to talk about C++ because that's like a really big thing right now. I also want to talk about Python because not only is that a really big thing right now, it's also going to be a really big thing in the future where C++ will likely decrease. Maybe not even in applications, but in popularity and also in job demand, whereas Python will increase. I also want to talk about the two versions of Python, Python 2 and 3, uh, and how you should really stick with 3 nowadays. I also want to talk about something called W3 Schools where you can learn all about web development. So if you're interested in web development, that's a great option to start. Of course, there's always YouTube and there's always Udemy. Those are great resources if used correctly. There's weird things on the internet and stuff like that. Sometimes it's not always the best course. Sometimes it's not always the best explanation even. And I mean, nothing's perfect. There's no perfect way to get, to fully transition to text-based programming. It's just a matter of uh, can you learn the material? Can you put in the work? Are you willing to learn it? And also, I wouldn't recommend you spend a whole lot even if like you're really passionate about programming, like such as myself, I wouldn't recommend you spend a lot of time on programming at once, especially in one day, especially if you're learning it. If you're learning it, you want to absorb what you're learning, whereas so you'll retain it for a lot longer rather than just rushing through a course in several hours all in one sitting. You might not remember it as well as if you spaced it out, a couple hours a day, a week, max maybe like a couple hours a day, something like that. But anyways, I'm just gonna go ahead and show you uh the Microsoft Virtual Academy is actually has a lot of good free courses that are really good that I'd recommend you take a look at. One thing that really helped me starting out was Bob Tabor, and oh yeah, none of this is sponsored, none of this is like affiliated or partnered or anything like that. It's not paid promotion. I just want to show you what personally helped me. Um, I just wanted to get that cleared up that if anyone thinks these people are paying to be on the course, they're not. Anyway, so the Microsoft Virtual Academy about Microsoft's a lot of good free content. What really helped me personally for C Sharp at least was Bob Tabor's course. Uh, And basically, you can go ahead and go to this page. You can go ahead and start the course. It'll be in a very similar format to this course, actually. And you can work through as interactive activities. Just really, really just, you just fully dive into the whole text-based programming here. After this, you can maybe start working with Udemy or work more with databases and SQL or SQL development. Um, and so that's he kind of points you in the right direction for there at the end of the course. But anyways, I want to talk about W3 schools. W3 schools is how I learned web development. It's not the only way I learned web development, but it's a staple way I learned. I just really, really can't express enough. This is actually a really popular site, by the way, but I can't express enough how just brutally helpful this was. Um, so what I did, I used a very popular software called Sublime Text, and I just went through these lessons, and I just went ahead and just started learning and learning as much as I could. Just trying to space it out. I kind of made the mistake of doing a lot of it too fast. At times, I was getting really excited with how useful what I was learning was. And anyways, what you can do, you'll be taken to W3 schools, right? And actually, all these are free. It's just that you can pay for like official certifications, which you don't have to do, but you can if you want. There's official certificates you can pay for. But it's free otherwise. No ads, nothing like that. It's really cool. You can go ahead and go here. Um, so web development. Most web pages are built on something called HTML, and that's just kind of like how the structure is done, like the text, the headers, things like that. And then CSS. Think of HTML as the fence, and then think of CSS as the paint on the fence. CSS is what makes your website colorful. It tells what colors to go where. It tells what icons, images, videos, and so on to go where. It's really good for styling. I mean, that's what it stands for, like computer-aided style sheets or something like that. HTML hypertext markup language is what that stands for, which is essentially uh, a text basically for throwing text on a web page is really all HTML is. They're just styling it with CSS. Bootstrap is great. That's how you can update content in a web page without refreshing the page, basically is what it is. JavaScript, very, very important. Very important to learn if you're doing anything with web development. And JavaScript isn't specifically pertain to web development, but it's really, really good to know. And there's all sorts of you've got JavaScript. There's all sorts of extensions, if you will, to it. Like there's jQuery, which is really common. There's JSON, which is really well known. There's also Ajax, which is really well known. But all these are pretty important. So I want to talk about front end and back end development real quick. So front end development would be like this web page I'm seeing right now, but so like design, if you will. It makes the button hover a certain color whenever I hover over it, and otherwise whenever I'm not. In fact, we even program buttons that do this type of thing. But anyways, it's just really just design, layout, things like that. Back end development would be things like security, making web pages, making them do what they do. You know, let's say if I click on this, it'll take me to a certain page. Well, it makes that happen. That isn't front end development. That's actually back end development. I mean, you could argue it's front end, but really it's more on the back end, on the server side, as we would call it. In fact, it says here server side. So SQL or SQL, huge, 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 very important to learn. Whether you're working with, there's so many languages that you really need to know SQL for. It's for working with databases, basically. PHP is not something I'm a huge fan of, but it's important to know, I'd say. ASP, similar. Node.js is just like JS, except for you can make web apps with them. You can do the same with JavaScript, but really it's a really clean way to do JavaScript. And it's really easy to make web apps on your website. Raspberry Pi. What a Raspberry Pi is, you can look it up on Amazon. Actually, it's basically just or something like that. It's a computer. You can plug in with a USB to your actual computer. I mean, it's a small computer, and then you can plug it into a laptop or a desktop computer. It'll basically be like a motherboard. You can put in like some Bluetooth adapters and all sorts of things actually. Basically, you're talking to this computer, telling it what to do, telling it and you can program a lot of really interesting things, especially working with radios, things like that. So Raspberry Pi is really cool. Big name in the programming world, actually. Um, Here we have just more programming. We already talked about C Sharp. I actually talked a little bit about C++ and how that's kind of the big thing now and how Python will be the big thing in the future. There's also something called Java. And in the programming community, Java is kind of, and also not to be confused with JavaScript. They're two totally different things. I know it's a little bit confusing, but Java is not generally well received in the programming community. It's probably one of the most least liked, unanimously least liked programming languages in the programming community. However, it is still important to know, and it's oftentimes necessary to know in many cases, and it can be useful for certain tasks. Another thing to note, if you ever take AP Computer Science in school, or if you have taken AP Computer Science in school, AP standing for Advanced Placement, or many college courses in general, our university courses, they usually do Java. Some are doing Python more now, like at colleges, but usually it is Java, and that's just a heads up there. Web building, this is just for design and stuff. They also talk about XML, which is huge. It's very similar to, I shouldn't say similar, but it's like Bootstrap in terms of what it does. Um, and I don't expect you to remember all of what I'm saying right now. I just want to give you a really brief interview. So all these like buzzwords and programming languages names that are being thrown around are completely confusing. Um, so these are kind of the big things. And there's several other languages. There's Ruby, there's Perl, there's Lua, there's a million others I haven't talked about. But really, I mean, there's some important ones that are good to know. Like for web development, I would say get involved with HTML and CSS, learn PHP, learn JavaScript, learn SQL. Learn SQL with PHP, something like that. For app development, I'd say take these C Sharp courses, then start working with C Sharp with SQL, and then start working with C Sharp with Unity. I also want to talk about, and by the way, none of these courses are endorsed either. I just want to talk about C++. There's a lot of great, great C++ resources on Udemy. I find that on YouTube, it's actually not as there's like ads. There's sometimes not the most quality mics. These are generally more professional. It's very clear. There's interactive activities, very clear walkthrough, a lot of lectures, a lot of content for a pretty reasonable price actually. They can actually save you a lot of time in the long run. I'd say some of these are a good investment. It's just I just look at these and see what's interesting to you. Same with Python. There's just a bazillion Python courses on Udemy. And there's all sorts of things you can look at here. But I would take some time to look into Udemy, W3 Schools, and Microsoft Virtual Academy. Um, if you're looking to get into text-based programming, and of course, there's a many, many, many other resources that haven't even scratched the surface for resources you can look into. But I want to just talk about some of the things that have helped me, some things I would recommend, and just basic outline, if you will, of ways you can go ahead and just start transitioning. And a lot of the content will actually make a lot of sense. It will start to click, if you will, if you really start applying yourself to what these concepts are because you actually been working with them already in Scratch and you just get this massive head start. You don't even really realize you had so much of a head start until you actually start working with it. It feels like all this weird technical stuff, but sometimes it does. And really, it's just a matter of it's a different world, but you can just kind of grow accustomed to it, and you can actually become really proficient. There's people that didn't think they'd like programming at all and just gave it a try, and then they found out they were even good at it and really enjoyed doing it, and just maybe even turn it into a career. It's of course a lot of great career opportunities with programming. And I would just take some time to look into text-based programming, of course, if you'd like. And again, this is not a text-based programming course by any means, but I do want to provide some bonus content to you guys for actually just how them where they go from here, where they go from here. That's pretty much what I had. I look forward to seeing you guys in the next lecture, which will be the conclusion for the course. Um, so yeah, I've got some interesting stuff for you there. I look forward to seeing you there.